Which African-American desserts have slipped through our fingers? The ones nobody bakes anymore. They used to fill our kitchens with warmth, make holidays feel complete, and bring families closer together. How did these treasures disappear so quietly from our tables? Tea cakes were more than cookies. They were symbols of love and belonging, baked fresh in African-American homes for Sunday gatherings and holiday celebrations when the whole family came together after church services. These tender cookies weren't too sweet, but they held just the right amount of sugar and spice to stay in your memory forever. The true magic of tea cakes lived in their simplicity. Nothing fancy, just flour, butter, sugar, and maybe a hint of nutmeg or vanilla if the family budget allowed for it. Children counted down the days until special occasions, knowing tea cakes would be waiting. Grandmothers mixed these by feel. No measuring cups needed, their hands remembering what recipes couldn't capture. Each batch told its own story, slightly different from the last, but always comforting. Some families kept the tradition alive through whispered instructions in the kitchen, while others treasured handwritten recipes tucked into worn cookbooks that smelled of age and love. The cookies found their place beside cups of tea, coffee, or cold milk, soft enough that young and old alike could enjoy them without trouble. These days, you'll rarely find them outside heritage cookbooks and museum kitchens, but they still remind us what togetherness tastes like. Losing them from our tables feels like watching a piece of family history drift away. Yet their spirit lives on in the stories told by elders who can still smell them baking if they close their eyes. Vinegar pie stands as one of those brilliant inventions born from necessity, particularly during the Great Depression, when simple things like lemons became luxuries most couldn't afford. African-American families welcomed it as salvation, a way to create something sweet and tangy when the pantry looked empty and hope seemed thin. The filling relied on what was always there: sugar, butter, eggs, and just enough vinegar to trick your tongue into thinking you were eating fruit pie. Nestled in a flaky crust, it baked into a custard that surprised everyone with its perfect balance of richness and tang. It became expected at Sunday dinners and celebrations, showing the world that creativity could turn scarcity into something people remembered with smiles. This pie meant more than dessert. It symbolized survival, proving fancy ingredients weren't required to keep joy on the table. It taught younger generations about making something from nothing, about resourcefulness being handed down like silverware. Though many folks today might look puzzled at the thought of vinegar in dessert, those who grew up with it understand the warmth and dignity it carried. It wasn't just about flavor. It was about refusing to go without, about making hard. Time's a little sweeter. You won't find many pies anymore that carry stories like that, which makes vinegar pie truly special. Molasses stack cake commanded attention at church socials, weddings, and community celebrations. Yet it started with the humblest ingredients, stretched as far as human ingenuity allowed. African-American families baked thin rounds of cake flavored deep with molasses, then built them into towers with more molasses or sorghum spread between each layer like mortar. Sometimes the cake became a community project, with different families each bringing a layer to contribute before the final assembly. The result stood tall and proud, a dessert that grew more delicious as time passed, the molasses slowly soaking through those tender layers until cutting into it felt like slicing through silk. It didn't assault you with sweetness, but instead offered the deep, earthy richness that molasses brings, a flavor that speaks the language of Southern cooking. Taking a bite meant celebrating more than dessert. It meant honoring community and the hands that built it, proving that simple resources could create something magnificent when people worked together. As time marched on and boxed mixes with store-bought convenience became the norm, molasses stack cake quietly faded from everyday life. Still, its memory holds strong as one of the most cherished but forgotten creations, reminding us that food once had the power to unite entire communities, one patient layer at a time. Caramel cake used to rule Sunday dinner tables, a dessert that proclaimed love, patience, and genuine skill in every single slice. The cake itself was tender and light, but the frosting, oh, that's what people remembered. Homemade caramel icing demanded your full attention, standing over the stove, stirring sugar and butter until magic happened and it transformed into liquid gold. African-American families throughout the South reserved caramel cake for moments that mattered, where it presided over the table as the crown jewel of celebration. This wasn't something you threw together quickly, but rather a dessert that required practice, confidence, and the willingness to give it time until the caramel reached absolute perfection. The taste ran deep with a complexity no boxed mix could ever touch, and the texture dissolved on your tongue like a sweet memory. Children pleaded for the honor of the first slice, and grandmothers served it to company as evidence of their kitchen excellence. Gradually, easier frostings and store-bought alternatives claimed its spot, but the memory refuses to fade for those who grew up knowing its taste. It represented more than sugar and butter. It was love made visible, devotion baked into every golden layer. Sweet potato cobbler once filled homes with anticipation during the holidays, the air thick with cinnamon, nutmeg, and melting butter. African-American families sliced sweet potatoes into thick rounds, arranged them in layers with sugar and warming spices, then tucked them under blankets of pastry crust. As heat worked its magic, the potatoes softened into something almost custard-like, melding perfectly with that flaky, buttery top. Unlike cobblers made with berries or peaches, sweet potato cobbler brought a heartier, earthier satisfaction that tasted like belonging. It appeared faithfully at Christmas, Thanksgiving, and church gatherings where people reached for seconds before finishing their firsts. Families treasured it for more than taste alone. They valued its practicality too. Sweet potatoes stored well and lasted through cold months, so this dish connected celebrations directly to the land, especially since many families grew their own sweet potatoes and used them with pride. Today, sweet potato pie might still claim space on holiday tables, but cobbler has largely vanished from the seasonal spread. Its disappearance reminds us how easily traditions slip away, though those lucky enough to taste it can still recall its comfort. Sweet potato cobbler wasn't just dessert, it was celebration itself, baked golden and offered with open hands. Cornmeal pound cake carried a roughness that set it apart from delicate desserts. Instead of light and airy, this cake was substantial, dense, and textured, thanks to cornmeal mixed right into the batter. African-American families often baked it in loaf pans or seasoned cast iron skillets, cutting thick slices to serve alongside morning coffee or afternoon tea. The flavor spoke plainly but warmly, a marriage of buttery comfort with the honest grit of cornmeal. It thrived especially in rural areas where cornmeal cost little and filled pantries more reliably than refined white flour. The cake stayed good for days, making it sensible for busy households that couldn't spend all day in the kitchen. While it lacked the showiness of frosted layer cakes or elaborate centerpieces, cornmeal pound cake held its ground as something dependable and true. It was a dessert that whispered of resourcefulness, demonstrating how ordinary ingredients could become worth remembering. Over years, it stepped aside as boxed mixes marched in, but its memory stayed firm among those who understood its humble charm. Cornmeal pound cake may be absent from most modern kitchens, but it once stood as proud evidence of African-American ingenuity and clever cooking. Transparent pie was a specialty that once graced Black Southern tables, a simple yet remarkable dessert with deep roots in Kentucky tradition. Made from butter, eggs, sugar, and cream, it created a filling so clear you could almost see through it, shining beneath its golden crust like captured sunlight. African-American families prepared it for gatherings and church suppers, where its sweetness satisfied without demanding costly ingredients. The pie's straightforward nature made it reachable for most families, but that glossy, nearly see-through center gave it an elegance that commanded respect and admiration. Recipes, passed from one generation to the next, remembered now only by those who stood in kitchens watching their elders whisk the mixture together with practiced hands. Transparent pie embodied thrift and cleverness, turning pantry staples into something that looked far more impressive than what it cost to make. Its taste lingered rich, smooth, and deeply satisfying, a blend of cream and sweetness that stayed with you long after the plate was empty. Though it has nearly disappeared from contemporary cookbooks and dining tables, transparent pie remains one of those hidden treasures from the past. Remembering it feels like peering through a window into kitchens where wisdom and tradition created desserts that truly earned their place in history. Blackberry dumplings were born from foraging adventures when families gathered berries from wild bushes growing along property lines and open fields. African-American households transformed these tart little berries into something magical by simmering them with sugar and dropping in spoonfuls of simple dough. The dumplings swelled up in those bubbling purple juices, creating a dish that filled you up and made you smile at the same time. It marked summertime tradition, especially across the South, where children picked blackberries until their fingers turned purple before running them back to eager hands in the kitchen. The dessert reflected an era when food came straight from the earth with barely any steps between finding it and eating it. Served steaming with fresh cream or enjoyed cold the following day, blackberry dumplings provided comfort and nourishment in one humble pot. They represented careful living, creative thinking, and pure happiness all mixed together. While cobblers and crisps stuck around, dumplings have almost completely disappeared from everyday cooking, pushed aside by quicker, simpler recipes. Yet those who remember blackberry dumplings speak of them with genuine fondness, the sharp berries perfectly balanced by pillowy soft dough. It was a dessert that captured summer itself, made even sweeter because it came from honest work, shared effort, and the generous land. Potato candy sounds strange until you taste it, but it was once treasured in African American homes across the country. Mashed potatoes got mixed with powdered sugar until they formed a dough you could work with your hands. This mixture was rolled flat and spread generously with peanut butter before being rolled into tight logs and sliced into pretty pinwheels. The candy cost almost nothing to make and required no special ingredients, making it popular when money was tight and times were hard. Its flavor surprised everyone, the pure sweetness of sugar playing beautifully against the rich depth of peanut butter. Children especially adored potato candy because it looked playful and felt like a genuine treat. Even when resources ran low, it became expected at holidays and family gatherings where plates of colorful slices sat proudly on tables for everyone to admire. Though it might sound peculiar by today's standards, the candy testified to creativity and the power to transform basic foods into something that brought smiles. Potato candy proved that kitchen wisdom could manufacture joy from scarcity. While it rarely gets made anymore, it remains one of those wonderfully odd and unforgettable recipes tied to heritage, memory, and the resourceful determination of past generations. Coconut custard pie was once essential at church potlucks and family reunions, where its silky texture and tropical taste stood apart from every other dessert on the table. African American cooks blended eggs, milk, sugar, and shredded coconut to create a custard that baked into a golden, fragrant masterpiece. The coconut contributed both sweetness and pleasant texture, elevating a simple custard into something people talked about for days afterward. It was served in generous portions alongside coffee or sweet tea after satisfying meals. Coconut custard pie meant celebration, proving to everyone that even the most basic ingredients could feel luxurious when prepared with genuine care and attention. Families often protected their recipes fiercely, adding personal touches like fresh nutmeg, bright lemon zest, or a generous splash of vanilla to make their version uniquely theirs. Children often remembered it as the distinctive taste of church gatherings where long tables overflowed with home-baked desserts made by loving hands. Today, coconut cream pies remain somewhat popular, but the custard version has nearly vanished from sight. Its absence creates a quiet emptiness in cultural memory, even though it once stood with confidence on countless tables. Coconut custard pie deserves recognition as one of the clever, beloved desserts nobody makes anymore. Apple Brown Betty was one of those brilliant desserts that transformed scraps into pure comfort, layering sliced apples with breadcrumbs, sugar, and warming spices. African American families relied on it when pantries looked sparse, making good use of leftover bread that would have turned hard and useless otherwise. Butter or cooking fat got dotted between the layers, and as it baked, those crumbs soaked up every bit of spiced apple juice. The smell alone turned kitchens into places of warmth and belonging. It was a dish that came together quickly, yet it always tasted like something truly special. Children loved it for being sweet and tender, while adults valued it for being thrifty and practical. Often baked in well-seasoned cast iron skillets, it carried the rustic beauty of resourceful kitchens where waste was simply not acceptable. It was served warm, sometimes with milk or cream poured over the top, stretching a few apples into enough dessert for the whole family to share. Though it rarely appears on tables today, Apple Brown Betty was once a reminder that clever thinking created lasting memories from the simplest ingredients. Buttermilk pie was AI's straightforward yet luxurious creation that earned its place at family gatherings and Sunday dinners throughout the South. Made from everyday staples like eggs, sugar, butter, and tangy buttermilk, it baked into a creamy custard with a lightly browned crust. African American households valued it for its dependability, since the ingredients lived permanently in the pantry or icebox. The flavor achieved perfect balance, slightly tart but mostly sweet, with a smooth texture that seemed far fancier than its humble beginnings suggested. Grandmothers often pulled one from the oven just as guests arrived, letting it cool on the table as a signal that celebration was beginning. Each family added their own signature touch, sometimes including bright lemon zest, warm nutmeg, or fragrant vanilla to deepen and enrich the flavor. Buttermilk pie was also wonderfully practical because it kept well, allowing leftovers to be enjoyed happily for several days afterward. Served warm from the oven or chilled from the icebox, it always carried a deep sense of comfort and continuing tradition. Today, it has been pushed aside by flashier desserts with more drama, but its quiet richness tells the story of kitchens where love and thrift created something that endured through generations. Chess pie was a sugary custard creation that once claimed pride of place in Southern kitchens, including countless African American households. Its filling combined butter, eggs, sugar, and cornmeal, which gave it a slightly grainy texture that distinguished it from smoother pies. The result was a dense, intensely sweet dessert with a caramel-like depth that lingered pleasantly on the tongue long after swallowing. Families appreciated it for its beautiful simplicity, since all the ingredients were affordable and stored well, making it possible to prepare one at a moment's notice for unexpected company. Chess pie was regularly baked for church suppers, holiday tables, and neighborhood gatherings where a single pie could be cut into small but deeply satisfying portions that pleased everyone. It represented the brilliance of cooks who elevated plain ingredients into something genuinely beloved. Though recipes still exist in dusty cookbooks and online collections, it has quietly faded from everyday baking, replaced by store-bought convenience sweet. Those who remember it recall its sweetness with genuine fondness, tied forever to voices of mothers and grandmothers serving it with visible pride. Chess pie was once more than just dessert. It was heritage itself, baked carefully into every single slice. Molasses cookies were the kind of treat that spoke of both hardship and comfort in equal measure. Sweetened with molasses during times when refined white sugar was too expensive or simply unavailable. African American families leaned on them heavily during difficult years, blending flour, lard or butter, spices, and thick molasses into a dough that baked into dark, wonderfully fragrant rounds. The Iwa cookies were crisp around the edges, soft in the middle, and carried the rich complexity of ginger, cinnamon, or nutmeg, depending on what the spice cabinet held. Their aroma filled kitchens with warmth and anticipation, especially in colder months when families gathered close for comfort. They were often packed carefully into tins, lasting several days, and serving as an affordable snack for hungry children coming home from school or play. Each bite carried a complete story of resilience and determination, showing how talented cooks transformed limited resources into genuine joy. Molasses cookies were also staples at community events, baked in large batches for church socials or fundraising gatherings. Over time, as refined sugar became more accessible and affordable, the cookies slowly disappeared from regular baking rotations. Yet they remained tied firmly to memory, representing cleverness and the deep sweetness of making do with what you had and being grateful for it. Banana pudding with meringue was once a guaranteed favorite at family gatherings, carefully layered with homemade custard, vanilla wafers, and sliced bananas, then crowned magnificently with fluffy meringue. African American cooks elevated this beloved dish by topping it with browned meringue rather than simple whipped cream, which gave it elegance and beauty without adding any expense. The custard was cooked slowly on the stovetop, thickened patiently with eggs and milk until it reached silky perfection, then poured lovingly over layers of cookies and fresh fruit. The meringue was whipped vigorously by hand until it stood in stiff peaks, spread across the top like snow, and baked just long enough to turn golden brown and gorgeous. Families valued it because it made a modest amount of bananas feed a crowd while still tasting absolutely indulgent and special. It was often served at church dinners where its airy topping caught eyes before the first spoonful even reached waiting mouth. The pudding was sweet, creamy, and impossibly soft with the pleasant crunch of cookies softened perfectly into the mix. Today, instant mixes have replaced the homemade versions almost entirely, but they lack the patience, care, and pride that went into the original. Banana pudding with meringue was once a true centerpiece of gatherings, treasured equally for its beautiful taste and its impressive presentation. Rice pudding with raisins turned yesterday's leftovers into pure comfort, proving that even plain rice from last night's dinner could become something worth anticipating. African American households baked leftover rice with milk, eggs, sugar, and warming spices like cinnamon or nutmeg until it set into a soft, comforting custard. Raisins or other dried fruit were often stirred in for extra sweetness, making the dish feel considerably richer than its simple ingredients suggested. The pudding was filling, affordable, and nourishing, providing both energy and warmth on lean days when money was tight. Families often baked it in large pans so it could be reheated throughout the week for breakfast, dessert, or a quick snack whenever hunger struck. The smell of cinnamon and vanilla made kitchens feel cozy and safe, while the golden top promised something satisfying underneath that would fill your belly and warm your heart. It was never flashy or impressive, but it carried the genuine taste of tradition and the practical comfort of thrift. Rice pudding with raisins also taught children important lessons about not wasting food, showing them clearly how yesterday's plain meal could be reborn as something new and desirable. Though it is rarely made today in most households, it remains remembered fondly as one of those clever recipes that kept families fed with both sweetness and practicality during uncertain times. Blackberry jam cake was a dense spiced dessert that once filled African American homes with its rich, intoxicating aroma that drew people to the kitchen. Made with cloves, cinnamon, and nutmeg, the cake was moistened beautifully with blackberry jam, stirred right into the batter before baking. It baked into a dark, fragrant loaf that sliced thick and heavy, tasting of both bright fruit and warm spice in perfect harmony. Families praised it enthusiastically because it made excellent use of homemade jam, often prepared months earlier from wild blackberries gathered during summer foraging trips. This meant the dessert carried not only wonderful flavor, but also the living memory of warm days spent gathering and preserving nature's bounty. It was a cake served on special occasions, sometimes frosted fancy, but often left plain to let the jam's flavor speak for itself without competition. The spices gave it remarkable depth, while the jam kept it moist for days afterward, making it a practical choice during lean times when fresh ingredients were scarce. Blackberry jam cake represented tradition, resourcefulness, and the pure pleasure of stretching summer's harvest well into winter's cold. Though it has nearly vanished from tables today, it stands proudly as one of those unforgettable creations that carried both history and genuine heart in every single bite. Oatmeal pie was a thrifty answer to shortages, especially when pecans were too expensive for working families to afford during hard times. African American cooks blended oats with sugar, eggs, and syrup, baking it into a pie that looked and tasted surprisingly close to expensive pecan pie. The oats provided pleasant texture, while the syrup created a sweet, gooey filling beneath a perfectly golden crust. Families valued it deeply because it allowed them to enjoy something rich and festive without the prohibitive cost of nuts. Oatmeal pie was often baked for holidays or Sunday dinners, where it satisfied cravings for indulgence on a modest budget that couldn't stretch to luxury ingredients. It was also clear proof of kitchen ingenuity and creativity, showing how smart substitutes could create entirely new traditions that people cherished. The pie became tied to resourcefulness and determination, reminding families that celebration and joy did not depend on luxury or wealth. Served warm from the oven, it was comforting and filling, its sweetness softened perfectly by the hearty presence of oats. Today, it has slipped into obscurity and been largely forgotten, yet it remains a clever reminder of how African American households created genuine joy even in the hardest, most challenging times. Shoe fly pie was a molasses-rich dessert that entered African American kitchens through Southern foodways and quickly became woven into family tradition. Its filling of thick molasses, brown sugar, and crumbs baked into a dense, sweet custard that carried both deep flavor and sustaining energy. Molasses was affordable and widely available almost everywhere, making the pie a practical treat for families with limited means and tight budgets. The flavor was bold and unapologetic, not delicate or subtle, with a strong sweetness balanced beautifully by the crumb topping that baked into a pleasantly crisp layer. Shoofly pie was often served in thick, generous slices alongside hot coffee, making it a favorite choice for gatherings or late afternoon treats when something sweet was called for. Families appreciated it not only for its distinctive taste, but also for its thrift, since molasses stretched considerably further than refined white sugar. Over time, it became less common as American tastes shifted and store-bought desserts took over kitchen tables. Yet, for those who remember it clearly, Shoofly pie is tied permanently to memory and heritage, carrying the richness of the past in every bite. It remains one of those clever recipes that absolutely deserves to be remembered and celebrated. Peach ice cream made by hand was a summer joy that created memories as sweet as the dessert itself, created outdoors with hand-crank freezers packed carefully with ice and salt. African American families gathered on porches or in yards, taking turns cranking the handle as the mixture churned slowly into frozen cream. Fresh peaches, peeled and mashed, were stirred lovingly into the custard base, giving the dessert its bright, unmistakable sweetness. The process took considerable time and genuine teamwork, but that was part of its magic and appeal. Children waited impatiently for the first scoop, often licking the wooden paddles clean once the freezer was finally opened and the treasure revealed. The flavor was absolutely unmatched, fresher and richer than anything you could buy from a store, then or now. It was also an event more than just dessert, since making it brought everyone together in laughter and shared effort. Peach ice cream was served at reunions, picnics, and summer holidays, where it cooled hot afternoons and created lasting memories that people carried for life. Today, electric machines and pre-made cartons from the grocery store have replaced the ritual entirely, but they cannot replace the feeling or the togetherness. Hand-churned peach ice cream was more than food. It was family and tradition spun together into pure sweetness. Pineapple upside-down cake was once a mid-century showstopper, baked in well-seasoned cast-iron skillets, where caramelized pineapple rings and bright red maraschino cherries created a jewel-like topping that caught every eye. African American households often served it at celebrations where its golden glaze and tropical flavor felt festive and genuinely indulgent without breaking the bank. The cake batter was poured carefully over the sugared fruit, then flipped dramatically once baked, revealing a glossy, sticky crown that made guests smile and reach for their forks. It was practical too, since canned pineapple was inexpensive and easy to find year-round, making it possible to prepare in any season regardless of what was growing outside. Families loved its cheerful appearance, the sweet fruit pairing perfectly with the soft, tender cake beneath. Children often fought playfully over the cherries, considering them the absolute best part of each slice. Over time, as trends shifted toward lighter desserts and convenient packaged mixes, pineapple upside-down cake became less common on family tables. Yet, for those who grew up with it, the cake remains a powerful reminder of Sunday dinners, birthdays, and church socials, where it always stole the spotlight and drew compliments. Its fading presence leaves behind not just a recipe on paper, but a memory of joy baked into cast iron and shared with open hearts. Prune cake was a thrifty dessert that turned what many considered a humble, almost embarrassing ingredient into something rich and deeply satisfying. African American families stewed prunes until soft and tender, then blended them thoroughly into a spiced cake batter filled with cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves. The prunes gave the cake a deep, complex sweetness and moist texture that lasted for days without drying out, making it perfect for large households or gatherings where food needed to go far. It was served plain or dusted with powdered sugar, sometimes with a drizzle of simple icing when resources and time allowed. Prune cake was practical because prunes kept well in pantries for months and were affordable compared to fresh fruit that spoiled quickly. Families valued it not just for thrift and economy, but also for comfort, since its flavor carried warmth and deep familiarity. It was often baked during holidays or shared at church events where its rich aroma filled kitchens with anticipation and brought people running. Today, the cake is rarely seen anywhere, dismissed unfairly by modern tastes that don't understand its appeal. Yet it was once genuinely beloved, a reminder that clever, skilled cooks could transform simple ingredients into something extraordinary that people remember. Prune cake stood as living proof that desserts were about heart and care, as much as luxury and expense. Jelly roll cake was once a showpiece dessert that brought a sense of elegance and sophistication to African American households during special events and celebrations. A thin sponge cake was baked perfectly, spread with homemade jam or jelly, and then carefully rolled into a tight spiral. When sliced, each piece revealed a beautiful swirl of color that made it look considerably fancier than its simple ingredients suggested. Families often prepared it for birthdays, church socials, or Sunday dinners, where presentation mattered as much as flavor and taste. The rolling required genuine skill and a gentle hand, since the delicate sponge could crack easily if not handled carefully, making it a dessert of both pride and patience. Homemade jams from summer fruits like blackberry, strawberry, or plum often filled the center, adding seasonal flavor and color. Children loved the slices because they looked almost too pretty to eat, like something from a bakery window, while adults admired the careful work and attention to detail. Though jelly roll cakes have mostly disappeared from modern kitchens, they once represented creativity, thrift, and the pure joy of making something beautiful by hand. Its fading presence shows how desserts that once felt like artistry and craft are often forgotten in favor of convenience. Molasses pull candy was one of those family projects that turned ordinary kitchens into workshops, filling long evenings with laughter, sticky hands, and tired arms. African American families cooked molasses or sorghum with sugar until it reached exactly the right stage, then poured it carefully onto buttered pans to cool slightly. Once firm enough to handle, the candy was pulled by hand, stretched and folded repeatedly until it turned glossy and light in color. Children and adults alike took turns tugging at the long strands, their arms growing tired, but their spirits staying high throughout the process. It was as much about the journey as it was about the sweet reward waiting at the end. Since the candy was shared at the end of the night, divided among everyone who helped, its flavor was bold and distinctive, rich with molasses, and far different from anything you could buy at a store. Families cherished the memory of gathering together for the task, knowing that patience, teamwork, and cooperation made the candy possible in the first place. Though this tradition has nearly vanished from modern life, it once stood as a powerful symbol of togetherness, creativity, and joy. Molasses pull candy was not just confection or sweets. It was experience itself, made edible and shareable. Hummingbird cake was a dessert tied closely to African American gatherings throughout the South, combining mashed bananas, crushed pineapple, and warming spices into a moist, flavorful cake that stayed tender for days. It was generously frosted with cream cheese icing, making it rich and indulgent without being overly complicated. The fruit gave the cake natural sweetness and kept it tender and moist, while the spices added warmth and depth. Families served it at reunions, weddings, and Sunday dinners, where it became a centerpiece dessert that drew genuine compliments from everyone who tasted it. Hummingbird cake was often passed around in large, generous slices meant to be shared and enjoyed together at the table. Its popularity soared during the mid-20th century, but over time it has quietly faded from many kitchens and recipe boxes. Though still remembered fondly in Southern cookbooks and family collections, it rarely appears on modern tables, overshadowed by trendier desserts that change with the seasons. Yet those who recall it know it carried a spirit of celebration and abundance, a cake that symbolized generosity and care. Hummingbird cake remains one of those recipes that tells a complete story of hospitality and joy, baked with both fruit and tradition. Water pie was one of the cleverest Depression-era inventions, proving dessert could still be made when cupboards were bare and money was tight. African American families mixed water, sugar, flour, and butter in a crust, baking until it thickened mysteriously into a soft, custard-like filling that defied explanation. The taste was surprisingly sweet and creamy, making it feel like so much more than the sum of its humble parts. Families valued it not just for its flavor, but for what it represented on a deeper level: resilience and resourcefulness in the hardest years anyone could remember. It showed that joy and sweetness could be found even when money and supplies were desperately scarce. Its simplicity made it accessible, a dessert almost anyone could prepare regardless of their circumstances. Today, water pie has nearly disappeared completely, but it remains a reminder of how kitchens stretched every scrap to keep spirits lifted during impossible time. For those who remember making it or eating it, it was more than just a recipe written down. It was proof of hope baked into every slice, a clever way of turning almost nothing into comfort, dignity, and something worth gathering around. Drop your sweetest memory in the comments below. Hit like if you're craving a slice of the past, and subscribe so we can keep serving up these forgotten treats and memories together.